Being a minimalist comes with its fair share of stereotypes and assumptions. While some of these may be true to some extent and in some instances, I've made a list covering the most common myths that I've come across over the years and my take on them. But first, if you're new to my channel, thank you for stopping by. Here we talk about minimalism and things of that nature. So if that sounds good to you and you end up liking the video, be sure to like and consider subscribing. Let's get started. So I'm going to go over these myths and why they're not, at least in my case, true. And the first myth is that a minimalist can't have a collection. I've said before that minimalism is all about intentionality and owning the essentials. And if someone has a collection that brings them value and happiness, I would say it's essential. It seems like a contradiction to be a minimalist who collects, but being a minimalist doesn't mean you have to sacrifice something you love or depriving yourself of joy. I actually encourage collecting if it brings someone happiness. Not so much anymore, but I used to buy a coffee mug from anywhere I visited, and that collection quickly got out of hand. So I personally decluttered the ones I didn't use and kept the rest. If you're decluttering things you like just for the sake of owning less, you're not really doing minimalism right. The next myth is that minimalists hate buying things. And in my case at least, this isn't true. I just like buying the right things. The things that I put thought and reason into. I would even argue that a minimalist likes purchasing more than a non-minimalist. Because the things a minimalist purchases are typically things that are needed or wanted a lot more with thought and research put into them. The next myth is that a minimalist can't wear colors. And this is an incredibly silly stereotype. My wardrobe was pretty dark until recently. I know, speaking for myself, I mostly wore the same thing every day because black t-shirts either matched everything or I simply didn't want to decide on an outfit. It doesn't mean I don't like to switch it up sometimes. The next myth is that there are rules. Something I always stress is how minimalism looks different for everyone. Everyone has their own version of minimalism that'll look different from everyone else's, including mine. So I think minimalism is as easy or as complicated as you make it. There's no rules saying you have to get rid of a certain amount of items, and there's no rules saying you have to wear plain clothes. The only rules minimalism has are the rules I gave myself, and those are the rules I have for purchasing something and the rules I have for saying yes to something. So the only rules are the rules you give yourself. The next myth is that other people's clutter bothers me. And I actually get asked this quite a bit. And this is probably the most untrue one for me. What other people have and how much other people have is not for me to judge. I would never force minimalism on anyone and make it seem like my way of living is the right way of living. I encourage everyone to have their own definition of minimalism and own as much or as little as they like, free of my judgment. The next myth is that productivity is the result of being a minimalist. As far as YouTube goes, it seems that a lot of people who talk about minimalism also talk about productivity. I wouldn't say that minimalism made me more productive, but it did open doors that led to productivity, if that makes sense. Naturally, eliminating the non-important and non-essential granted me more time to put into the things that I think are important or are essential. When the unnecessary tasks were cut out of my life, I focused on only the things that I wanted to or needed to. So I guess you could argue that made me more productive. The next myth is that minimalists are cheap. And I could slightly understand this one because most minimalists are frugal. Or I could argue the opposite. Minimalism led me to buying things of higher quality rather than the affordable, cheap things that needed replacing more frequently. Quality over quantity is a rule I try to live by. So being cheap and being frugal are two different things. I would definitely say I'm more selective of my spending, but it's because I want less, not because I'm afraid to spend. And the next myth is it's about how much or how little you own. Naturally, one of the first things you think about when it comes to minimalism is the number of items owned. And over time, I realized it's a lot less about how much I declutter physical items, but what I do with my newfound time and just slowing down and enjoying some negative space. I've gotten better at this, but I do still feel guilty sometimes after a purchase. Am I even a minimalist anymore? Is a silly question, but one I ask myself after buying something. In my version of minimalism, it's not about how much or how little I own. It's about owning things that bring me use and value and using them until they're unusable. I think the important takeaways from these myths is that minimalism can be done a million different ways and that I'm allowed to wear colors now. Anyways, I hope you got some value and inspiration out of this video, and maybe I kept at least one person out there from throwing away their coffee mug collection just for the sake of being a minimalist. As always, I appreciate your time watching. If you did like this video and you do like this type of content, be sure to like and consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you next time.